everybody's doing well. All I can say is that it has definitely been hot here in Durham, North Carolina, as well as just in general. It has definitely been some very hot weather. I'm going to find out how things are going where Steve Anderson is at and all along those lines. But we've definitely been having some hot weeks in general. So it's definitely been in those 100-degree temperatures and definitely some thunderstorms that pop up and some other things along those lines. But, we've had Steve on before on our new show, and he's definitely talked about strategic risk and business growth, and he actually had some experience in the insurance space. And actually, Nick Alvado, one of our founders here on the network, is a pension attorney and has actually done some work in the insurance space as well. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more from Steve as to how he has even been handpicked by LinkedIn as one of the world's most influential thought leaders and all along those lines. So definitely looking forward to having Steve share some of the things that he's got going on and what he's got going on with this book and some of the lessons that he has learned and even how we can deal with strategic risk as well. So I'm going to bring Steve in and he's going to share a little bit about his thoughts and all in that space. And then we might even have definitely some further conversations just as to some of the things that he has learned from talking to some of these amazing individuals and all along those lines. So, Steve, glad to have you back on again on the Pod TV network to share more of what you've got going on. And I know you talk about strategic risk and business growth. And a lot of times folks don't even think about those risks when they are going into business and all along those lines. So if you just share a little bit about this amazing book that you have written along with your business partner, who I believe is your wife, if I remember correctly, and
That is
all along
correct.
those lines. And if you can just talk a little bit about the tension that exists between risk taking and business growth, because sometimes folks aren't always realizing that when they are going into business, they might have to take some risk and they need to plan for the said risk and all in that space. But definitely looking forward to our conversation. But if you want to share more about this book and more about some of those things that you got from writing the Bezos letters.
Mark, I'd be happy to, and thank you again for having me back on. So, the Bezos Letters is a book I wrote based on or at least the idea was sparked by my work in the insurance industry and looking at companies that were once very successful but are no longer here, literally gone, and ones that have been successful continually and are still here and are still generating success. I now say obviously, at the time it wasn't obvious, but I came across Amazon as one of those examples of a company that's been successful and continues to be successful. And then came across the letters to shareholders that Jeff Bezos wrote and did a really pretty deep dive into those letters and was pretty fascinated by the amount of information that he provided about not just Amazon's growth, but how they did it. And I think that was something that I saw was very different than most shareholder letters. I think the only exception I can point to is Warren Buffett, right? And his letters that people wait to come out. I think Bezos was along those same lines. So again, this idea of strategic risk, it really is born out of two thoughts. One is technology continues to develop rapidly in any industry. I don't care if it's insurance or retail or online, e-commerce, whatever it is, technology continues to develop rapidly. And we're seeing that even now, right? With the generative AI and all the hype going on with that. That's a pretty normal cycle of something new. And the way I describe it is all of a sudden we hear about the problem with the all of a sudden is, for example, artificial intelligence has been talked about since the mid 50s. And so it's been a lot of years of development to get to this point of kind of a breakthrough, maybe. So when I look at businesses and ask the question, is the biggest risk they face actually not taking enough risk, not paying attention to some of those trends, sitting back and resting on their past success without being strategic about what's next, and not even innovation. I actually think that term is overused right now. And again, I'll point to Amazon. At Amazon, invention is more important than innovation. And in order to invent, you've got to experiment. And if you're going to experiment, you're going to fail. In fact, Bezos says, if you experiment and you know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. So businesses need to build a culture of embracing the failures that happen along the way in order to get to those big ideas that actually are the next new thing. Now, Amazon still innovates, right? Like the Kindle. They invented the Kindle, but they continue to innovate. So I'm not saying innovate's wrong, but it's, in my mind, out of order. So, some initial thoughts.
Well, there's some great, fascinating things that you're bringing up. One of the things that we talked about on one of our other shows, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, is I know that in a lot of ways, Amazon definitely believes in corporate responsibility and it definitely believes in taking onus in terms of their responsibility as a corporate citizen. I don't know that all corporations do that. So I just wonder your thoughts as to whether corporations have a moral duty to kind of look at the overall picture and not just the bottom dollar. And from what I've read about Bezos and some of the other leaders, they do seem to have that kind of mindset, those that are more successful. There's kind of this notion of being not just about the dollar, but also about trying to make the greater good in society as a good corporation. I'd love to hear your thoughts because what I've heard about Bezos, that while he may have his toys and other things, he does seem to be a corporately responsible citizen.
And why not have the toys, right? So, a couple thoughts come to mind. One is, um, I don't necessarily agree with the thought that if I have a lot of money, um, I have to, right, give it away. Um, they worked for that money, et cetera. So I, we could talk a bit more about that, but I would say specifically with Bezos, they did things all along. And one of the phrases that's coming to mind that he has said in a couple of different interviews is that large companies can do things that smaller companies can't. And that's one of the advantages of a large company. Now, we're certainly seeing a lot around Amazon and other large companies in terms of them being monopolies. And I don't know that I want to get into all of that. And at the same time, even from early days, Amazon did something really interesting, and it's called the Amazon Smile, like their Arrow Smile program. And what that was is instead of Amazon deciding where money was going to be given, they allowed their customers to choose the nonprofits, charities, organizations that they wanted to support, and a percentage, not huge, but a percentage of the sales the money they spent on Amazon would go to those organizations. And they raised millions of dollars for a variety of organizations. Now, they recently shut that program down. I don't know why. I thought it was a really interesting way to let their customers decide where their philanthropy should be as an organization. And certainly Bezos as an individual has done that a lot. And so another example corporately is in one of their buildings in Seattle, actually their headquarters. They actually have I don't remember now, I think it's 2 or 3 floors that are dedicated to an organization in Seattle that helps the homeless. So they provide space for homeless individuals while they're getting back on their feet. And that's just part of their building and how they think about that. So there are multiple examples. And then we go to the climate pledge. So early on, they committed to helping the environment and invited other companies to come in and do the same thing via this vehicle called the Climate Pledge. And the Climate Pledge is organizations saying we will work toward these goals over a period of time. So again, lots of examples of the money that Bezos made, that Amazon has made, does go back into the community. And they really do work on trying to support local communities. And now with their new headquarters in outside Washington, D.C., in Arlington, Virginia, they also are making huge investments in education, homeless, um, food banks, all kinds of things to help support the community that they are now a part of.
By that kind of corporate responsibility and that kind of corporate attachment and all along those lines. I'm actually going to
Yeah,
play a
Mark, I'm
commercial of
not
a
hearing you. I'm
business
not
leader
quite
and a
sure.
couple of other things going on and all in that space. So I'm going to play a couple of PSAs
I
and
don't
I will
think
come
anything
back and we're
changed
going to
on my
continue
end.
this conversation.
I love to introduce somebody really awesome. He is a master of training other speaker, and he is a great speaker because I saw him speaking, and he hardcore. He looks like athlete. He looks like a fighter, but when he starts speaking, he speaks with a real warm heart and really touch people's heart and really fascinate people.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and square holes. They're not fond of rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them or disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the one thing you cannot do is ignore them. Because they change things, they push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that do.
Reuben West communicates by connecting with his audience when he presents and when he's sharing a key message. Being able to connect and communicate your instructions clearly is a masterful skill.
The ultimate professional. Reuben is a guy that not only teaches a message, but also demonstrates the message. He's helped me to craft my art, and I'm sure he'll help you to craft yours.
Very accomplished international speaker, being able to just connect to any audience, no matter where they come from or what kind of people they are. He helps you and serves you in every kind of way to elevate you as a speaker, and I highly recommend him.
He is a people's heart connecting scientist with a using instrument of your voice and your appearance and your heart to touching people's heart.
His communication is unmatched. I'm Australian, he's American, and it really makes no difference as to our culture and where we have come from, because his message, the way he communicates it, is from humanity.
Find a way to take the next step. Thank you.
It is a gem, tucked away near a forest, a place where the lost are found. It is a gift of wholeness for those who are ready to receive it. A secret place where peace can be found in stillness. Where you can finally stop fighting to survive and just breathe. Just breathe. Where accountability corrects and the word help is not a cuss word. It is the place that was thought of before you ever thought you needed it. It is where forgiveness starts and healing begins. Well, we are taught that when we put our hands to work, we can create something. As we uprooted the weeds in the garden, it was a reflection of our lives. as we uprooted disappointment, as we uprooted pain, as we uprooted being traumatized. Because God doesn't deal with the surface, He gets to the root of it. We laughed. We shared tears. We shared our stories. We shared our fears, our dreams, our visions, our heart. We were more than just mothers. We were broken women trying to figure out how to become whole again. It became a place where homelessness became hopeless until we reached the bridge of wholeness.
Me clear now. Again, a couple of the interviews and everything going on along those lines, and we've got all kinds of things happening in that regards. But one of the things I was going to ask you, Steve, and everything is definitely you have done a lot of work as a influencer, and I know I've been given that title as well. But what to you does that mean? Because as I was reading your description, I was going like, they're calling him a LinkedIn influencer, and I know that I've been called a influencer as well, and sometimes I'm going like, well, I'm not exactly sure what that means and all in that space. But I was wondering, as one that has got these kind of titles, you have definitely got that ranking from LinkedIn and from other things, and you've definitely been in a number of great publications, whether that's Forbes, whether that's Bloomberg, or whether that's a number of other ones. So I'm guessing that that is why they consider you an influencer. I don't know that I have that kind of reach and all in that space. So like I said, when I got the notice of being an Amazon influencer, I was going like, I don't think that I've done all that much
What?
with Amazon and all in that space, but that's what they said I was, and I don't know that I've done enough work in terms of maintaining that status. But yeah, they listed me as an Amazon influencer at one point, and I'm still trying to figure out how I got that ranking, even though I don't do a lot of work on Amazon. I might recommend some friends that have books and things along those lines. But at one point, they considered me an Amazon influencer, and I saw that was your LinkedIn title. And I'm going like, so what does
Yes.
that mean to be an influencer, and how does it help you in your own business growth? I guess I'll put it that way.
So the influencer tag and title for LinkedIn is actually a very specific program that they created, I think in about 2013 or 14. And it was a group of the original group that I was part of was 150 individuals that they identified. And again, I have no idea why I was included, but they identified as having something to say is how I would say it. And so that tag is something LinkedIn bestows on me and others. And that, again, so that's how that happened. You can't request it, you can't apply for it. It's just something they do. That has helped. Yeah. And that has helped me actually a lot, just in terms of visibility within the insurance and financial services arena. I have followers on LinkedIn, about 340,000, because LinkedIn promoted me in terms of new signups or individuals that were engaging on LinkedIn and people you might want to connect with or other ways. And so that's just from the reach has certainly benefited me quite a bit. And it's one of the reasons that I really have focused my energy and effort in social platforms on LinkedIn, because I have the most reach there. I have the support of LinkedIn, and that continues to this day. So
Yeah, no, that sounds really good.
and
One of the other things,
I agree with you, Mark, in terms of Amazon. They gave me that designation too. I like you. I don't do a whole lot. I don't really sell on Amazon. I buy on Amazon, but I think that's part of it. But
yeah,
whatever.
I guess it was just part of the process, and I couldn't figure out what the methodology was that they were using, or what their algorithm was, or any of that thing in that
Yep.
kind of space. I was a little lost, and like I said, I appreciated it, and I try to use it as best I can. But I'm still a little puzzled as to what it exactly means. But another
I
thing that I
agree.
mentioned at the beginning is that you are seen as one of the world's most influential thought leaders. So to you, what does it mean to be a thought leader, and what does that title actually mean, because I hear a lot of times, including coaches, including even sports folks, and sometimes I think that they are thrust into these roles of being thought leaders, even when they might necessarily have a thought about the particular issue that they are being thrust in. It's kind of where I get frustrated when people ask the athlete to represent the community that they are from, even though they may not have per se an opinion on whatever it is that they're being asked about. And the same can be said around entertainers as well. But I was just wondering what being a thought leader means to you, and what your definition of a thought leader is.
Well, I echo some of your comments in terms of, I think people who say they're thought leaders may or may not be.
Right.
And that's, again, validation, third party validation for me on LinkedIn. They're the ones that picked me. And, in the best sense of the word, I think it's somebody who has the ability and can communicate ideas and thoughts in a different way. And I would say an example of that for me, we just talked about, which is innovation's overrated, invention's not rated high enough. I
Mm-hmm.
think people don't think that way right now. And so when I talk about that, I am trying to influence how people think and maybe get them to think differently about a particular topic or subject. And certainly around the book and Amazon and the growth principles, there's a lot of things there that I talk about that are not something a lot of people talk about. So can I be influential? I like influential maybe better than thought leader,
Right.
but I do think that's an external label that people put on others. And like you said, entertainers, athletes, some other, because of their success, therefore it's assumed they must have more to say.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do, and
Yeah.
sometimes they don't.
Yeah. No, because I can think of some that have definitely jumped into the conversation, and in some ways, I did think of them as being thought leaders.
Mhm.
A schoolmate of mine, and I did go to Marquette, was Doc Rivers, and we know that a couple of times with Black Lives Matter and some of the other things that were going on, including some of the stuff around Colin Kaepernick and others, that he did use his voice and actually tried to influence the conversation. And like I said, there are things that he said that I might have agreed with. There are things that he said that I might not have agreed with, but definitely it did seem that he was using that voice he had in the sense of being the coach. I think at the time that he was doing that was of both the Clippers and the 76ers, and even including and encouraging some of his folks to speak out as well on some of these important issues. So I thought in that sense, he was being a thought leader and using his position in order to influence the conversation. And even though he's out of a job right now, he's not totally out of a job, because he just recently got hired as a consultant for the Clippers. And I'm sure that some of the networks may be coming at him about being a color commentator as well.
Sure.
So he will probably still use whatever voice he has, whether that is as a coach, consultant, or a color commentator, to speak on some different issues that are of concern to him and all in that space. So I think you can use it as a tool if you have those issues, but I don't like it if people just automatically assume that you're going to know the issue because you are of whatever group that is part of the conversation. So like I said, I think you can do like Doc did and insert yourself into the conversation, or you can choose not to. And I don't think that the media needs to automatically assume that you are going to have an opinion on everything that is part of your group dynamic, whatever that group dynamic is.
Yep, I agree. Totally agree.
Switching back on that and everything, one of the things that I know, and then speaking of group dynamics, it is a industry that here in Durham was part of a growth area, and it was definitely part of a minority growth area, but it also sometimes has a bad name. So I've got to teach you about this and ask, when you first got into insurance, did you have to deal with that? Because I oftentimes think of insurance salesmen as having that kind of negative stereotype that also car salesmen have as well. So is that something that you ever faced? And if so, how did you deal with that? And I know that you are married, and I don't know whether your wife was in that same field or not, but was that something even in the dating field where she was going like way back when and everything? She's going like, no, you're an insurance person. I'm not talking to you. You've got that salesman personality and all along those lines. Or maybe she's got a saleswoman personality for all I know. But I was just wondering, how did you deal with that stereotype? Because insurance salesmen, car salesmen, I can name a couple of other ones, do have that kind of negative stereotype that is out there.
Yeah, I agree. And what I would say is used car salesmen are below insurance salesmen in the list. But so yeah, totally agree. And I think a little different for me in that my first how I got into the industry was working for my father-in-law.
Hmm.
He had an independent insurance agency in the Washington, D.C. area, and I came in to help him out for a while, never thinking I'd stay. Found out I really liked it. It's helping people sometimes in their worst
Hmm.
time, right? A car accident or a house fire or whatever that is, or a business gets a lawsuit because something happened, and you're able to be there, help them. So that part I really like. And I also like the technical side of it. So an insurance policy is just a contract.
Right.
And so understanding the provisions and helping others understand what actually they're buying. And so for me, it's been a great industry to be part of. It's provided huge opportunities. And I do think, I think the picture of an insurance salesman might be what we call it, in the industry, the debit person.
Hmm.
So debit policy was a door to door. You sold life insurance, not a large amount, but you could pay it either weekly or monthly. And the debit person would go around and collect the premiums. Well, that feels a lot more like the vacuum cleaner salesman process
Right.
versus, I think, certainly what's happened more. And that's still a little bit a part of the industry, but it's a small part. But what happens now is, you know, people, individuals or businesses build a relationship with an insurance agent and trust them with the knowledge and skill needed in order to properly protect them. And that's really all an insurance policy does is if you suffer a loss, accident, fire, lawsuit, insurance steps in to help you with that particular loss and get you back to the same financial position you were in before the loss. Now, there's lots of conversation around how well they do that and the insurance companies, and no question about that. But it, as an industry, literally, and I believe this pretty strongly, you could not be on this show without insurance.
Yeah.
Right? I
Right.
mean, it literally keeps the economy running because nobody would be willing to take a risk without that insurance. And that's what happened hundreds of years ago
Hmm.
in England at Lloyd's of London. The ship owners started getting together saying, hey, it's really financially brutal. Why don't we get together, share that risk? We all pay part of the premium. Somebody suffers a loss, then we'll help them restore. And hopefully it doesn't happen to us, but the next time we might need that help. So anyway,
No, that makes a
long
lot of sense.
answer. And what's the right word? I am high on the industry.
No,
So
I appreciate it. It definitely sounds like you're very high on the insurance industry for sure and all along those lines. We had a guest not that long ago that was talking about their weight loss journey, and they talked about the 12 principles that they went through, and they definitely did a numerical way of doing it. And a lot of it sounds like it was similar principles to what you talk about in terms of test, build, accelerate, and scale, even in their journey. And a lot of it also involved faith and some other things that were
yep.
there. So I was just wondering how much of this notion of putting things in easily digestible formats is part of what we need to do, whether we are growing a business or accomplishing a goal. Because as I'm thinking about your 14 principles that you talk about, which are test, build, accelerate, and scale, I'm also thinking about Miss Pickett, who is talking about the 12 reasons and 12 principles that she had, which she was involved
Yep.
in the weight loss journey and all along those lines. And it sounds like there was some crossovers in terms of some of the principles that were involved. And that's why I bring it up, because it seems like we need to put things in an easily digestible format in order to get these goals accomplished. But I was just wondering your thoughts.
Yeah,
around.
I think that's absolutely agree with you on that. And one of the things we did as we were crafting the book is 14's a lot. So that's a lot to digest. And we wanted to put it into, again, you say a digestible format. And we did that with an infographic, so we had the 4 cycles and then the particular principles in each of those cycles. It was easy to glance at and easy to I think, get the flow. And we've got arrows moving. So it's easy to get the overall concept. And then if people want more, then they can delve into the book, because each chapter of the book talks about each principle and kind of the overview of what each of the cycles does. But that's a better way to help people digest and, again, get the concept of what I was trying to communicate.
That makes a lot of sense. I know one of the things you talk about, and a lot of times corporations talk about it as well, is this notion of risk. And I sometimes think that a lot of people, when they go into business, don't realize the risk they are taking, because we know that even if we want to look at the athletes and the entertainers, there are many of them that would love to be successful, would love to be the next Michael Jacksons, or then that's in the world of music and all, and in that space, so they would love to be the next Jeff Bezos in the world of business, or maybe the next Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise in the world of entertainment and everything. But we know, and I know that you know this as well, that the success rate of folks that go into these fields is not all that high. I want to say that it is very minuscule, the amount of folks that actually make it into the NBA, when you look at the amount of folks that play high school sports, college sports, and a number of other sports as well. And we can use the NFL, and we won't even talk about the NHL, which is even a whole nother ball of wax, and baseball and all along those lines. But it is not something that is easy to break into, and your chances of success, you are taking a risk in that sense. So I'm just wondering, what do you think that enough people, when they are going into their various careers, understand the notion of risk and understand the importance of having a feel for the risk that they are taking?
So 2 comments on that. One, first is I live in Nashville, and so there are musicians everywhere.
Yeah.
But very, very few, just to reinforce your point, very, very few, get a contract, much less have success on touring or albums or all of that. And really talented people, and lots of different reasons why they didn't or why they did. But yes. So the other concept or thought I had was, we think of entrepreneurs starting a business as risk takers.
Right.
And I think that's maybe true, but I'm not quite as confident that they're taking smart and strategic risks. A lot of times, in fact, I was just talking to somebody recently who was describing their friend who had a passion for running in tennis shoes. And so he decided he'd sell shoes. So he opened a running shoe store in his town. And he failed miserably because there weren't enough runners that wanted shoes in the town to make his venture successful. And I think that's maybe a danger of following a passion versus thinking like a business owner and finding out, are there going to be enough people to sustain my business first? So yes, he took a risk, but I would call that not a very smart one, versus a strategic risk, which is, let's do the research. Maybe let's start out small. Maybe not a big store, maybe a kiosk in a I don't know, a mall or a pop-up somewhere where we test out the concept. And again, it goes back to some of the principles I talk about, right? Test and build. You got to test the idea first to see if it's going to work, and then figure out how you're going to build that into a sustainable business.
No, because I've seen that, and it is a very risky field, and across the board, no matter which aspect of it that you do it. But I do have some friends that are in the restaurant business and all along those lines, and some of them actually, they started off with a food truck and then maintained and built up an audience with that food truck before they then went and got the storefront property and have had success with the storefront property. But they first built up the audience with the food truck
with the
and
food
all
truck.
along those
I
lines.
think that's a great example. Great example. In fact, there are literally 10 minutes from me right now, I think 3 different examples exactly that. Food truck first, then went into a retail space. Some still have the food truck and some
Right.
don't, right?
Right.
But yes, I think that's a really smart way to think about it.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about. But then I've also heard some people that are using the food truck model and then they are wanting to use that for other industries. And it sounds like it could be an interesting model, but then you've got to think, is there enough of a market? For example, one of my executive bosses in one of the jobs that I work is actually a cultural arts center, was at a business meeting here in Durham where I live at and everything. And they ran into a lady that was going to use the food truck model, but she was going to be doing a mobile washing unit. And I don't know that it is taken off yet. I think it'll take off later on this year and everything. And of course, there are a number of people that are in the homeless space and other kind of spaces, including those that might be making trips to the kind of extended stay type hotels that don't always have those kind of services. So it could be a business that could be lucrative and everything, but then I don't know that there is enough of that traffic here for it to be successful. And that would be the question that I would be asking: is that one, if they're homeless, will they be able to afford it and be able to get the service if you're going to do the standard laundromat version of things? And 2, of the extended stay people, 1, are those extended stays not going to have it? And if they don't have it, will they be in town long enough that they will use the service? So like I said, in theory,
or how
it
do they
sounds
even
like a
find
great
the service,
idea.
right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are a bunch of questions there. I agree.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering about. But then you see other things that are on those lines that were fairly successful, like using that bookmobile idea. I know that there are a couple of mobile dental units that seem like they have done well because they've gone into areas that don't have great dental care, and they'll be like the mobile dental version as well. So like I said, it's just interesting to see how folks choose to take the risk that they choose to take. And in some cases, they work very effectively. In some cases, they don't. At what point do you think, and this is just a Mark to Steve question, should a company or a person think about cutting bait? Because there is a lot of times that you go into business, you think that the business is going to be successful. You have your reasons for the business being successful. Hopefully you put together a business plan, even though I know a lot of businesses that haven't done that thing. And then you are at some point, you're either going to be successful, you might be, as we use the restaurant example, going from the food truck to a storefront, or you might be scaling up, as they use that phrase, and all along those lines. But what are you seeing as some of the key factors that people should think about if they are going to make that decision to continue on the business journey?
Well, I think the first thing is I would put metrics in place or recommend they have metrics in place before they start, meaning what are you tracking and what are the right things to track? And is that growing? Is it not growing? And certainly part of that is, okay, what resources do you have to invest that you can lose? And, again, I think one of the hardest things is, well, I've already invested all this money. I have to keep it going. And, economically, that's the fallacy of the sunk cost. That's gone, right? The question is, are you going to continue to lose money? And are you seeing anything, or have you changed anything in your model that gives you a more confidence or optimism that the change is going to have a positive impact on cash flow, on customers, on sales, et cetera? And if you don't, then you're probably better off cutting sooner than later.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if there are times that you need to have a percentage goal. Like, I know that there used to be this saying that I think you didn't want to spend, I want to say it was somewhere like 30%. It might have been a little bit less than that on your housing and all if you were making a household budget. And I would think that there would be similar kind of things in a business sense, that if you are bleeding money in your business, that you got to figure out how long you can bleed it, and that you have a set goal as to how long you can
Right.
maintain that loss before you have to, as I said earlier, cut bait and just maybe go into another business or go back into the corporate world, or go back into the workforce and everything. Because one of the
Right.
things that I found very fascinating is that during the pandemic, a lot of people were working from home, and they were also exploring the notion of going back into their own business and all along those lines. And I personally think that that's why some people aren't exactly rushing to go back into the corporate office environment, because they have found things that are more in the entrepreneurial lane that they are trying to use to maintain their living. Now, at some point, those things may be successful and they may be able to do that, or at some point, they may find out that they can't have their Lyft and their Uber job and their own little private businesses, whatever they are, and they do have to go back to work for Walmart or whatever company that they might have been working at previously and everything. But that's just some of them that I've observed. A
Yeah,
number of
and
people try to start up their own businesses.
yeah, and the thought just came to mind. Those of us with spouses
Mhm.
that might have the, what's the right word? The I can't think of the word I want to use. The spouse might have something to say about how long you keep going.
Yes, that
Right.
is true.
So,
That is, yeah, the significant other might be like, look, we got to pay these bills, and
right.
Johnny
Or
and
I'm working hard and you're not making any money. It's time to cut. Whatever the situation might be. But I think you've got to be open to that, and you've got to be not so tied to the costs that are already gone, those sunk costs. Those are gone no matter what. And so sometimes you're better off pulling the plug sooner than later.
no, I
Sometimes,
definitely
and this is the hard part. Sometimes if you just stick it out a bit longer, you might hit that growth curve.
right.
And it's really hard to know when to do what.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an easy answer for that.
No, I don't think there's an easy answer. But the other thing that I've noticed that people have really gotten into, and it comes back to Jeff Bezos and Amazon and all along those lines, is that many a person will think that, I've got tons of stuff in my house. I've got tons of services that I am able to do, and all along those lines, and I can make money off of those in much the way that Amazon did, because basically, in a lot of ways, Amazon, when it came out, was a internet retailer, and there are a number of other internet retailers out there as well, like eBay and a number of others, and folks even Etsy will be like, hey, I've got this skill, I've got that set, I can do just like Amazon did, and I can make money in that internet retailing space. I don't know that it is as easy as people think it is, even though there are tools that help with it, like Canva and a number of other tools that can help you get your products out. But I don't know it's as easy as folks think it is. But I was wondering your thoughts, because I do think a lot of people are thinking that, hey, I've got this service, or I've got this ability, and it'll be very easy for me to make a profit using the internet model.
Well, yes, and I think again people tend to underestimate the amount of work and overestimate what they can accomplish. And again, back to Amazon, their marketplace program, where third-party sellers can sell on their platform, does make it easier. And it's not easy. I agree with you. And it's easier if I'm selling product, if I don't have to worry about warehousing and inventory, I don't have to worry about fulfillment, and shipping costs. Marketplace sellers get all of that from Amazon if they want.
Right.
Now, they may want to do it themselves, and that's fine. But Amazon has created hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of small businesses by selling those services, warehousing and logistics, to smaller businesses who could never build that out on their own. And that's one of the things that Bezos looked at early on, that growth was their focus. But once they invested the money, like fulfillment centers and warehouses, then adding someone new was very small in terms of additional cost to Amazon, and they could now make money from that third-party seller. And it helps Amazon's customers. And I mean, there's a lot of benefits going on with both Amazon and third-party sellers, certainly in the e-commerce space.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to say is in that e-commerce space, there are some, and I mentioned one of them earlier with eBay and definitely Etsy, and I would even put Shopify in there as well. That seemed like
Mhm.
they were doing quite well during the pandemic. Amazon seems like it has continued to do well. I haven't looked at the stock market and don't claim to be an investor in any sense of the word all along those lines, but I don't know that they are doing as strong as they used to do and all in that space, and they might have taken a downturn, not so much Amazon, but the other ones that I just mentioned. But in your observations, is that what you have seen? Because I don't know that I hear as much about Shopify and eBay as I did during the earlier days of the pandemic. And part of that is because people were sitting at home trying to figure out how they were going to get not just their food, but their personal items, whether that was
Right.
the
Right.
shoes or shirts or whatever else that they might want to have come to their house and they can go out to the store to get that item.
So I would say a couple things. One is Amazon scaled up during the pandemic because everybody turned to them.
Right.
So the demand increased significantly. What they didn't do a good job of was understanding that that demand would fall once the pandemic worked its way out. So they overbuilt fulfillment centers. They overhired. And you've seen them made a lot of adjustments over really probably the last year in terms of laying off people, uh, shutting down building projects,
Right.
in those kinds of things to adjust. And I think, again, large scale, no question, but looking at what steps they took to right size the trends they saw, which were not positive, meaning they took hard steps to get the cost under control, to get growth back, and help increase the margins within Amazon. I think like Shopify absolutely took a run at Amazon trying to do similar things. Um, I think the question there is Amazon so entrenched in that space that's going to be really hard for someone else to come in. I think the answer is probably. Walmart is trying, hasn't had much success, going from retail space to e-commerce.
Right.
They're doing a bit, but again, not great success, I would say. So it's definitely a hard space. And I think some of those players, eBay is another example, are trying to figure out how to do it. And is Amazon too far ahead for anybody else to catch up? I tend to think maybe, but I don't. No business is bulletproof. Amazon more than likely is going to fail someday. I think it'll be a while, and that's what happens. Somebody else will come along, something new will come along.
I can definitely see that and everything, but I'm imagining that Amazon can be just like a lot of corporations and even a lot of societies and everything, which is that maybe at some point it can grow too big and maybe be an implosion from within because they have grown too big. Because I've seen that with some corporations as well, where they have definitely gone into different aspects and different industries that weren't necessarily their core industry and everything. Because I have definitely seen that. I think Staples might be doing that to some degree with some of the things that they are doing with office supplies and even doing stuff that is outside of the traditional office supply kind of thing. And that's just one example that is coming to my mind. And there might be others that are doing that as well. So is that a danger that they may face, is growing too big and maybe even stepping into industries that weren't their core industry when they started off?
So yes, and in Amazon speak, that's called a day two company, right? So we talked before about day one, always be thinking, keep going. And that is a danger as a company gets big. And Amazon, I won't say is doing that yet, but they certainly are in danger of that kind of process. And I feel like what I'm hearing and seeing is they are aware of that and are trying to take steps to correct that and not do that. And even if they go in, like they're going into healthcare and pharmacy, and are those going to be big bets and experiments that don't pay off, or are they going to be big bets that do pay off? I'm not sure yet. I don't know that they know yet. But again, they're still willing to test those things and experiment with what might work and how it might work.
And it's interesting you say that, because I was actually thinking about the restaurants that had a core product, and then they merged with another product that was not their core product. Then folks would start wondering whether they were going to be as good in that product or not as good. And I'm thinking about like the fast food kind of joint things. Like, I think if I remember correctly, even though you don't really see them joint that much, I think it was KFC and Taco Bell that joined together. And then folks were like, thinking, well, KFC is a chicken company. What do they know about making a taco? And all these and the same with some of the McDonald's mergers, where they would see them merging with another food that wasn't necessarily the food that they were known for. And then folks that are loyal to that other product may wonder if they can adapt the same kind of scalability in that product that they are not known for. And I've seen that even with, like, I think it was Starbucks and one of the ice cream companies, or one of the coffee companies and an ice cream company. But definitely that's one of the things that I think people look at, is when they see these mergers even happening, is whether the company will be able to bring that original flavor, and I'm using that because we're talking food, into the new business and everything.
Yep. And it often can't. I mean, that's everybody thinks it's a great idea, and the execution then becomes very difficult.
Yeah. Well, like I said, ironically, and I'll get off the food topic, but there was a food court that was in one of our local malls, and we know malls have been struggling left and right. As a matter of fact, that mall is now gone, and they're trying to decide whether it's going to be a mixed-use facility or a bigger, not so much mall, but kind of like that bigger version of a storefront. I forgot what they call those things, and all along those lines. But they're trying to figure out what that new model will look like in our meeting with the citizens. But I do remember that there was a couple of restaurants that were known for their New Orleans style food, and I definitely enjoyed the New Orleans style food, but it wasn't anybody from New Orleans that was making the food. In that particular case, it was folks from the Asian culture that learned that New Orleans food and saw that as something that they could make a profit off of. And I don't blame them in the least bit for doing that, because they saw something that was wanted by the public. They could figure out a way to make it, and they made it, even though that wasn't necessarily from their own particular culture and all along those lines. But I don't remember hearing any people complain they actually enjoyed the meal that they were served by those fine folks at all along those lines. Amazon, I know one of the things you talk about is this notion of a successful failure. We kind of alluded to it earlier, but what is a successful failure, and is that something that more businesses need to be aware of?
So it's my first principle in the test cycle, and successful failure is this idea we've already talked a little bit about, of experimenting, knowing that you're going to fail, and learning from the experiment, so the next time you do it, you might succeed. Or you might go, you know what, this isn't going to work the way we thought it was going to work. And so the example I always give is what I consider maybe Amazon's biggest successful failure is their phone. Now, most people don't know that Amazon actually created and announced a phone, like a mobile phone, in 2014. And, kind of looking back on it right now, I kind of go, who needs a phone? Another phone. iPhones were already out. Androids were already out. People already kind of picked which one they wanted. And the Amazon phone didn't do a whole lot more. It made it a little easier to shop on Amazon, but why would I buy a phone just to do that? And nobody bought it, literally. I mean, at one point they marked it down to 1 cent.
Oh, wow.
And they couldn't give it away. So at the end of 2014, Amazon wrote off $78 million in development and inventory costs. However, 4 or 5 months after the phone was announced, Jeff Bezos got his first demonstration of a cylinder that could sit on a table that you could talk to. You could ask it questions and it would answer you those questions. It was the first Echo. And then Alexa, as we know it, as the machine learning voice that understood what your question was, researched the question, and spoke it back to you. So what they learned in the phone in terms of audio and all kinds of different things, they were able to transfer that failure of the phone into the Echo, and that's been a great success. So that's an example of a successful failure.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a successful failure because definitely the Echo and Alexa are doing quite well. You can't go hardly to a house or a car without hearing that voice, and sometimes it is oftentimes answering questions that you didn't even know that you were asking it because it might just overhear the conversation that is going on. I kind of alluded to it earlier and all along those lines in terms of business success, but how many businesses, Steve, do you feel are not actually putting together a business plan? Because one of the things that I have read about Gates and about even Bezos and others is that they might not have had the thorough plan, but they did have a plan in place, and that they might not have had the quote unquote education that some people think you need, whether that's college education or whatever, but they did have a core plan in place of what they wanted to do, and maybe even some partners that they wanted to work with, even though the partnerships didn't always work out. But I find a number of businesses, I don't care what field they're in, that don't have a business plan and don't have the kind of correct allegiances to the state that they are in terms of their right license and all along those lines. But I was just wondering how much of that is a conversation that you feel business owners are not taken seriously enough?
Quite a lot. So a couple comments. First is Jeff Bezos, when he and his wife Mackenzie drove from New York City to Seattle, she drove a lot of the way. He sat working on the business plan. So yes, he did have that in mind and written down, partly because he was looking for investors, so they wanted something, and partly that's how he thought. Kind of the second part of that is in the insurance agency space, based on surveys I've done, about half, 50% of insurance agents don't have a business plan.
Wow.
So typical small business, can we extrapolate that to other small businesses? I think that's a starting point. So most don't, or at least half don't.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and that can be an issue as well. How much do you think it is important in terms of a business to have those traditional or those strategic alliances and connections with folks? Like I said, partnerships are very big in business, and I know that sometimes the partnerships are very successful, but we also know partners that have literally, including some of the major partners, gone
Right.
their separate directions and everything because they weren't seeing the same vision and all along those lines. And I oftentimes believe that you can't necessarily live somebody else's dreams and everything. And I think that's where some businesses get in trouble, is they get talked into living the other person's dream, even though that isn't necessarily their dream. I'm not saying you can't be supportive of your business alliances and business cohorts and all of that, but I do think that sometimes people get caught up in getting talked into supporting the other person's business and not necessarily going for their own business. And we definitely have seen that on the bigger corporate level as well and everything. But I just wondering your thoughts about that and some of the research that you have found in those lines.
Yeah. So one is having a partner, either, a full partner, whatever, is one way to protect against the risk of starting, right? Because now you've got two people, somebody specifically who's trying to achieve the same goals you are.
Right.
So that could be protecting the downside. That could be one way to do that. The other side of that same coin is if it's not a compatible fit, and exactly like you said, if it doesn't, if both people don't resonate on the same goal or are heading the same direction, it can be worse.
Right.
Right. So there are benefits and detriments. And I've seen too many insurance agencies typically are multiple people, maybe one, but a lot of times they're multiple owners. And that becomes difficult if you have too many, because you can't get anybody to decide anything. I think this, I think that. No, who's running the show? And so that can be detrimental also if you have too many partners.
Yeah.
or too many people to try and corral into a decision.
And even in the insurance level, because I know that there are different types of insurance methodologies out there. And if you've got one partner that is supporting one type of that methodology and the other partner is more ingrained in that other methodology, then they might be able to work together and make it work as a team. But if one is pushing one over the other, then that could be problematic. And I don't remember all the different types of methodology, even though I do have some friends in that insurance space, but I do know that there are different types of insurance that are preferred by one insurance agent over another, and you
Yeah,
would do that better than I do. But and if you said them, I would remember them. But I just know that in my conversations, there are some people that like the like one is the IULs, and then there are a number of other ones that other people might not be as big a supporter of, and all along those lines.
yeah, yeah. And some of that depends on kind of what part of the industry you're part of,
Right.
et cetera. But um, and again, there are organizations that will help. And I'm thinking agencies right now, but I'm sure there's others that are kind of aggregators, that they help
Right.
bring a group together, provide services to the group, so you don't have to replicate that and spend money on what somebody else has already done. Not quite the franchise model, but kind of something somewhat like that. So again, these are all ways to mitigate the risk of starting something new.
Yeah.
And kind of back to your comment, in the insurance agency space, there are independent agents
Right.
who represent multiple insurance companies, and there are captive agents that only represent one. So,
Right.
like a State Farm or an Allstate, those agents only sell policies from those two insurance companies. That's not necessarily bad. I happen to be on the independent agent side. I think it's better for the consumer to have multiple choices. And for the agent starting out, they get a huge amount of support from those insurance companies that helps mitigate the risk of starting something new.
Yeah, because I've got friends that work in the real estate space, and I know that that same thing exists
Same
in
idea,
the real
right?
estate space. Because you might have somebody that is working for, I think it's Fonville Morrissey, and somebody else is working for like KW, uh, KW something. I can't
Yeah,
remember the whole
Keller
name.
Williams or
Keller Williams, right?
yeah,
But
and yes, it kind of a similar, and again, they're real estate agents. The broker who kind of runs that group oversees all of it and provides, services and
right.
support.
Right. And then
Yep,
there are, like you
similar.
said, there are some independent agents that don't necessarily work with those big firms. They're kind of doing it on their independent owned situation. So yeah, that model definitely exists in real estate as well, and a number of other businesses also. What do you think is some of the Bezos leadership skills that other business folks should look at? Because I know when I think of great business leaders, I think of people even here in this area that one were attached to the community, just because I think that that's important to have if you are going to be a successful business owner. And I know not everybody believes that philosophy, but I definitely believe in community ties by our corporate folks and all along those lines. And that's just partly because of my mom's work in the nonprofit world and all in that kind of stuff when she ran a major trust fund before she retired here in North Carolina and all
Uh-huh.
along those lines. But I definitely believe in that. And I think that there were even some big corporate types that had that kind of mindset, including some from here. Because if I think about the history of Mr. Duke, he definitely gave back to some of the poorer communities and not just those that were associated with the university, even though he was a tobacco
Right.
tycoon at the time and
Yep.
all along those lines. And even though there are folks that may not have liked aspects of Rockefeller, and I never knew the man, but from what I read, it seems like he definitely tried to give back to some of society. I think there were cases of one of the Rockefellers literally going around and giving money to those that were destitute because he had that kind of money that he could give away and all along those lines. And there are others that I can think of that are similar in that
Yep.
mindset. But that's just what I think of as being good leaders. But what do you think are some of the qualities of good leaders?
Well, I think good leaders, and again, I'll touch on a couple principles at least, is again having a corporate culture
Hmm.
that actually supports employees and supports their trying to make new products and better products. I'll say it that way. Successful failure, the invention and innovation, those ideas. I think a good leader hires good people. And so, again, principle is focus on high standards. It's, for example, at Amazon, it's really hard to get hired because they focus on high standards and they only want the best. And a lot of times that slows things down. But when somebody gets hired, then they give them the freedom and the ability to make decisions. And so there's a culture there of, again, the principle is high velocity decision making. Relying on those highly capable people that you've hired to actually do what you hired them to do and not have as much bureaucratic, oversight that squelches some of that. So I think those are a couple things that come to mind. One of the principles that I don't talk too much about, but is promote ownership. And Bezos was from the very first letter, from the very beginning, his focus was on employees, and he understood he needed good employees in order to make this work. And what he said was that employees need to be owners. Actually, what he said was employees need to think like owners. Therefore, they actually need to be owners. And so compensation at Amazon in the early days, this is changing a little bit now, but in the early days, compensation was weighted toward stock options, not salary and money.
Well,
So people got stock options because if they worked hard and the stock did well, they'd make more money than they'd ever make in a salary. And they were owners. So they were invested in moving the company forward and kept that as a front of mind thought process as they were making day-to-day decisions. So I think those are a couple of things that come to mind.
and along those same lines, a couple of things cross my mind. One is, do you think that Bezos and more corporations need to support the notion of growth within the company? Because I do know that a lot of companies give this mindset of the employee is the employee and the management is the management, and don't necessarily press the employees to move into management levels and all along those lines. I'm not saying that is all companies, but I've definitely seen some companies like that where there isn't enough push to get the people to advance, whatever that advancement is, and all along those lines. And those companies don't seem to do as well, in my mindset, because it seems to me that you need to be encouraging your employees to try to move up the ranks, for lack of a better term, in that space. But I don't know that many companies do that as well as they should. And then I was also curious your thoughts around micromanagers and macro managers, because I think that some companies get too caught up in the notion that they need to basically do your job. And I think that's micro. I always get them mixed up in everything. But there are the ones that want to not give you enough room to develop the ideas and grow even the product yourself, and kind of like want to be very hands-on management, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, so two thoughts again on that. One is that at Amazon, every employee is encouraged to invent, even in their own job. I mean, that it's expected, versus a lot of companies have research and development departments. That's over there. And the employees, you do what you do. But employees at Amazon are encouraged to fix what they see as a problem, come up with a solution, present that solution. And there's a little bit of bureaucracy there. I'll get into that in a minute. And then if their solution is accepted, then they may be tasked with actually running that solution. And you talk about tapping leadership. I mean, they may be, their manager may say, okay, you run that. So they're automatically, so they always have this internal process of identifying the superstars or the people who do a good job, giving them more responsibility to see how well they do, and then keep moving up. So a lot of times you'll see people at Amazon who are in a particular position or job for not a very long time. It might be 6 months, might be a year, might be a year and a half, but they're moving into another position. So again, go on LinkedIn, find somebody who works at Amazon And you can often see they've been at Amazon a long time, but they've had all kinds of different positions because they have been moved up the chain, as you said.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is Amazon is probably the largest company with the least amount of bureaucracy in it. Because again, they hire high quality people, they give them the authority to make decisions and do things. They don't have to wait to convince some supervisor or senior VP or whatever. If it's a big enough project, it may get to that level, and they can start now. And again, people recognize when employees are successful. So it's a hard place to work. There's a lot of demands put on people to produce, and promotion can be pretty quick if you are someone who can thrive in that type of environment.
How important do you think Amazon, and particularly Bezos, from your research, feels it is to create these kind of environments that are very community-based and community-oriented, but also very supportive of the family unit? For example, I work here in Durham, and I know that the narrative around both Cree and Red Hat was that they did really good in having these kind of playrooms and also having these kind of like exercise spaces, and even some things that were done in the sense of helping with daycare and other things for those that were working mothers. And that's just some of the examples that come to my mind off the top of my head. And like I said, I know that this was before the pandemic, so I don't know that those principles are still there, but that was definitely something that they were known for, is being kind of supportive and making sure that they weren't just doing the grind of the work, but that they were getting some other kind of things to have some relaxation and even in the work environment. So is that something that Bezos had also bought into? Because like I said, I know that was something definitely Red Hat was about, and I think even Cree had some stuff in that space as well, but I didn't know whether Bezos had bought into that as well.
Yeah, they do. And they do a lot of support of employees and families. I just read a recent article talking about an employee had cancer and all the things they did to support that employee and the family, in that difficult situation. They also do a lot with employees to actually help them get new skills.
Right.
And I would say this is a bit more focused on their fulfillment center employees, but career choice, they will pay 90% of college tuition, and it doesn't have to be something that is related to their current position. So they do a lot to support the employee to get them ready, and they know that a lot of those employees will leave. They want them to leave better than when they came. And so those are some examples of how they do that. And again, they are dog friendly. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of how they support employees in really a lot of different ways. And so.
No, it's interesting you bring that up, because one of my brother's longtime friends and everything has been, they all graduated from college except for this one friend had not graduated, but he has worked a multitude of jobs and is working the 3 or 4 jobs right now, including Belk's, definitely one of the printing companies. I think it's Bell or something like that, if I'm remembering correctly, or something like. Oh, I'm sorry, it was Bell, Blue Cross, and Amazon. So those were the 3 jobs he had. So it was actually Amazon, and because his daughter is going to school and he wanted to give a positive example of what to do, he is actually using what you just talked about, that Amazon credit and college, to go back to school to complete his degree, since she's about to go to Baylor. So he would like to have the degree completed before she goes to college and complete hers as well. But he was using that because we ran into each other, and he was telling me that he was going back to school, I think this summer, and it's hoping to get his degree probably in the summer or the fall, so that by the time she goes to school, and definitely by the time she completes, they can both say that they have had that college education, and he will be a successful family model and everything along those lines. But yeah, that when he actually literally just mentioned that to me about 2 weeks ago, that he was working, and I'm pretty sure it was the Amazon program is how he was getting to
that he was
complete.
getting help from. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
they they get Amazon gets slammed a lot
Mhm.
for, those how they treat their employees, and I don't think most people understand how actually well they do. Now, they're not perfect, no question about it. And, they were the first to raise minimum wage at Amazon to $15 an hour in 2018
Oh wow.
before literally anybody else did. And so, um, yeah, they try. They don't always make the mark, but they try and they learn and redo it and improve it.
No doubt about that and everything. We'll get ready to wrap it up very shortly. I think we've had another very enriching conversation, just like we did last time and all along those lines. But if there are final words that you want to share, including writing that book with that lovely wife of yours, because you kind of alluded to that on the first show as well as this one, and all in that space, and anything that you would like to share just that we haven't touched on, including some of the principles that we might haven't got to, then definitely I would love to turn it over to you for any closing remarks that you've got and anything that you want to share that we haven't got to. But I think we had another fun and enriching conversation once again.
Well, Mark, thank you, and thank you for having me again. Honestly, I think the only thought I would leave with is my last principle, number 14, is believe it's always day one. And that is something that Jeff Bezos has instilled into Amazon. That, and in fact, Mark Cuban is quoted as saying that Amazon's the largest startup he's ever seen, because they build into their culture this idea. Treat every day like it's the first day you're in business, like you're a startup. And I think those are some of the examples of the kinds of things that any business, I don't care what size you are, can take away from Amazon and how they do it, and is one of the reasons for their continued success.
Yep, I definitely agree with you. It definitely seems like they have tremendous success and all along those lines. If you were a predicting man, where would you say Amazon would be 5 years from now and 10 years from now? And will we have the Amazon electric car at some point and all along those lines?
I don't know that we'll have the Amazon electric car. There are plenty of people working on that. And again, kind of another point there is actually at Amazon, their focus is how can we do something that's meaningfully differentiated from what's out there right now. And that all goes back to customer obsession. So I think in 5 years, they will have right-sided from the pandemic, gotten stuff. They did too much growth during it. They sort of had to, and now they're kind of getting back to where they needed. I think we'll see that. I think in 10 years, actually, I think we'll see a new Amazon business like AWS, and it's Kuiper, Project Kuiper, Kuiper, which is the satellite internet. And certainly Elon Musk is doing the same thing. He's further ahead than they are right now. I think Amazon will come in with a higher speed and less expensive internet satellite service that actually will replace, certainly for rural areas, the poor internet service that they experience right now. But I think in 10 years, that will be another billion-dollar plus business globally.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, particularly if they can get that going for internet access in poor areas of the world, not just in the U.S., but around the entire globe and all in that space. How important do you think, and then like I said, just as we wrap up, I have one other quick question, but how important do you think it is for Amazon employees to be connected, or how does Bezo think it is for them to be connected on all the aspects of us as humans? Because I do think that some corporations try to pay attention to the emotional, the physical, the mental, which we kind of alluded to, but also the spiritual aspect as well. So is that something that you feel that Bezos and his leadership team try to do with their employees, is make sure that they are healthy or as healthy as possible in all of those aspects of us as humans.
Yes, I do. And the evidence of that is Bezos, in his last letter to shareholders, announced or wrote about 2 new leadership principles. Those are different than my principles. They're leadership principles, which are around employees. The first one is Amazon will be the best place to work in the world. And the second one, part of that, is it will be the safest place to work. And so we'll see how that works out. That's new, takes some time, but I think we're already starting to see some changes at Amazon because of those leadership principles and the focus they're putting on employee well-being and employee safety.
Yeah, definitely. Before we get out of here with one of the supplement ads that a good friend of mine gave me, and all along those lines, one of the things that I get every guest to do on just about every show is a message of positivity and hope that you would like to share with the global community. So if you want to live the audience with that message of positivity and hope that you want to share, and if you want to tell folks once again how you can be reached and how your book can be obtained, I will turn it over to you for those 2 things, and then we'll close out with that supplement ad and all in that space. So any message of positivity and hope, and anything that you want to share about how you can be reached and gotten in contact with.
So first, I am going to echo again this idea that it's always day one. And that's an optimism for the future. And, US and globally, we've got all kinds of problems. And even with all those problems, I'm very optimistic for where we're going. What we've been able to do as humans, literally for thousands of years, is come up with solutions to problems we have right now that we didn't know we could solve. And we see that over and over and over again. So I am optimistic about our ability to solve problems. Some of that may be technology, some of that may be something else, in order to make life better for everyone. So reach me. So
Yes.
We talked about LinkedIn a little bit. You can certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn. The book is available at Amazon. And depending on where you're located, it's actually been translated into 19 different languages. So it might be available in your country, in your language. In fact, we just had a few weeks ago a contract signed with a publisher in France that's going to be publishing the book in France. So we're excited about that. The website for the book is thebezosletters.com. And there's some additional information there that may help you if you read the book and give you kind of a little better understanding of how to apply some of the principles into your own business.
Sounds great. So like I said, we're going to close out with this supplemental ad and everything. But Steve, it's great having you on again, and definitely hope to have you back on either this show or our World Edition or some of the other shows in the not too distant future, because you always bring great insight every time you come on, and definitely hope to have you come back on in the not too distant future once again to share more of these great insights. And one of these times you're going to have to bring the wife along on the journey.
We'll have to bring the co-author along. Absolutely. Yep. That'd be great. We'd have a fun time. Mark, thank you for having me.
No problem.
Recognize the excuses are not valid. They're conjured up, they're fabricated, they're lies. And how do you stop the lies? You stop the lies with the truth. And the truth is, you have time. You have the skill, you have the knowledge and the support and the willpower and the discipline to get it done.
The fruit of everything good in life begins with a challenge. Everything is uphill this world. And it's not going to come to you, and it's not going to fall in your lap, and it's not going to be something that, oh my God, it just was so simple. It's always going to be difficult.
If you want it, you gotta go get it.
This is your chance. This is your shot. This is your moment. This is your time.
This is your time to get what you want. Go work that thing with Work That Thing supplements.